Keanu Reeves sat quietly in the dimly lit subway car, his hoodie pulled up, the brim of his cap casting a shadow over his face. He blended effortlessly into the worn-out seats, just another passenger on the late-night Los Angeles metro, escaping the chaos of Hollywood for a brief moment of anonymity. No flashing cameras, no screaming fans, just the rhythmic clatter of the train on its tracks and the hum of a city that never stopped moving. He had spent weeks dodging the spotlight, avoiding premieres, skipping interviews, and choosing solitude over the endless cycle of fame. Tonight, he was just another commuter, a man seeking peace in the most unexpected of places. The car was packed, yet eerily disconnected. Tired professionals clutched their briefcases, their eyes glued to their phones. College students, lost in their headphones, bobbed their heads to silent rhythms. A young woman scrolled endlessly through social media, oblivious to the world around her. The stale air carried the scent of too many people in too small a space, but Keanu didn't mind. He had always liked these in-between moments, the quiet spaces between the noise, the glimpses of real life beyond the film sets and red carpets. As the train screeched to a halt at Wilshire/Vermont station, the doors slid open, and the evening's tranquility shifted. More passengers squeezed in, among them an elderly woman clutching a weathered handbag, her eyes scanning the car for an open seat. No one looked up. No one moved. Keanu's gaze followed her as she hesitated, her shoulders slumping slightly in quiet resignation. That was the moment he noticed him, the young man in the gray hoodie, eyes sharp, posture twitchy. Something wasn't right. And Keanu felt it in his gut before it even happened. As the subway doors hissed shut, sealing the passengers inside, the train jolted forward, and the atmosphere in the car shifted. The elderly woman, Linda Carter, gripped the overhead pole tightly, steadying herself against the sudden movement. Her handbag, old and worn but held with a kind of reverence, bumped gently against her side. She scanned the crowded car once more, hopeful yet resigned. The young man sprawled across two seats didn't move. The woman glued to her phone didn't even glance up. The businessman in the tailored suit adjusted his briefcase but made no effort to accommodate her. She sighed and tightened her hold on the strap of her bag. Keanu Reeves, sitting a few feet away, took it all in. The subtle shifts in body language, the unspoken indifference. But then, something else caught his attention, him. The young man who had slipped in just before the doors snapped shut. Late 20s, sharp features, eyes that moved too quickly, scanning the car with a hunter's awareness. His gray hoodie was pulled low, his hands stuffed into his pockets, but it wasn't casual, it was calculated. Keanu had seen that look before, too many times. Predatory. Opportunistic. Dangerous. The young man didn't sit. Instead, he hovered near the pole, angling his body just enough to block the elderly woman's path. His gaze locked onto her handbag, his lips curling into a smirk that carried no warmth. Keanu felt it before it even happened, the inevitable moment when someone senses weakness and decides to exploit it. "Move it, Grandma," the man barked suddenly, his voice sharp and laced with something cruel. Linda flinched, startled by the sudden aggression. Her knuckles whitened around the pole as she tried to shift away, but the man stepped in closer, his shoulder grazing hers, not hard, but enough to assert control. He wasn't just taking up space, he was staking a claim. A few passengers glanced up, but their interest was fleeting. The kid with the headphones smirked, entertained. The woman on her phone kept scrolling, eyes flickering up just long enough to ensure she caught the drama on camera. The businessman in the suit turned a page in his newspaper, as if nothing had happened at all. Keanu's fingers curled into a fist beneath his hoodie. His jaw tightened, a slow burn igniting in his chest. He had seen moments like this before, where people looked the other way, where cruelty went unchecked simply because no one wanted to be the one to stand up. Linda tried again, shifting to slide past the man, but he cut her off with ease. "Where do you think you're going, huh?" he taunted, his voice louder now, daring someone to challenge him. No one did. Keanu exhaled slowly, his pulse steady but rising. He had come here to escape the world, to disappear into the anonymity of a city's underbelly. But anonymity had a cost, and right now, that cost was a frail old woman being bullied while 20 people did nothing. And Keanu knew, if no one else was going to move, he would. Keanu sat perfectly still, his hood pulled low, his fingers curled into a fist beneath his sweatshirt. His heart pounded slow and steady, but his body was tense, coiled like a spring waiting to snap. He watched, his pulse ticking up, as the young man in the gray hoodie leaned in closer to Linda Carter, the frail woman clutching her worn handbag like it was the only thing tethering her to this world. The bully smirked, drinking in the silence around him, feeding off the indifference. He shoved her again, harder this time. Linda staggered, catching herself on the metal pole, her breath coming out in a sharp, startled gasp. Still, no one moved. Keanu scanned the subway car, his jaw tightening. A kid with oversized headphones snickered, amused. The woman with her phone held it up slightly, adjusting her angle as if capturing footage was more important than stopping what was happening right in front of her. A businessman flipped a page in his newspaper, so deeply buried in his own world that he had effectively willed himself blind. The teenage girls near the door whispered excitedly, giggling behind their hands. Nobody was going to help her. The young man's grin widened as he reached out, snatching Linda's bag straight from her hands. "Oh no, you don't, Grandma," he mocked, lifting it high above her head like a schoolyard bully dangling a stolen toy. Linda reached up instinctively, her thin, trembling fingers grasping at air. "Please," she whispered, her voice small, breaking. "That's mine." The bully laughed, tossing the bag from hand to hand. "What's in here, huh? Rocks? Your whole damn house?" He turned to the subway car, playing to his audience. "What do you think, folks? Should I let her have it back?" The boy with the headphones whooped. The woman recording murmured, "This is crazy." Someone chuckled. Someone else looked away. And that's when Keanu Reeves had enough. The decision came in a breath, a shift, a choice made not with words but with instinct. He moved slow, deliberate, like a storm rolling in. He stood. His hoodie shifted as he rose to his full height, the cap still pulled low, shadowing his face. At first, nobody noticed. The bully was too caught up in his performance, too enamored with his own bravado. The audience, distracted by their screens and their own indifference, was still watching Linda, waiting to see how much further she could break before someone stepped in. Then, Keanu spoke. "That's enough." His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It cut through the space like a blade, sharp and precise, slicing through the background hum of the train and landing squarely on the man holding Linda's bag. The bully turned, his sneer automatic. "Who the hell?" And then he saw him. Keanu reached up, gripping the edge of his hoodie and pulling it back, letting it drop behind him. The cap stayed on, but there was no mistaking the face now. Recognition struck like a lightning bolt. The kid with the headphones choked on his gum. The woman recording let out a whispered, "Oh, my God." The businessmen finally looked up. The teenage girls squealed, their phones trembling in their hands. Keanu Reeves. The bully faltered, his cocky expression flickering, then cracking. His fingers twitched around the bag strap, but he didn't let go. Keanu's gaze was steady, unblinking, calm but lethal, the look of a man who had seen worse than this and would not hesitate to end it. "Put it down." The words weren't a request. They were an ultimatum. The subway car held its breath. The subway car had fallen into absolute silence. The moment Keanu Reeves pulled back his hood, the entire atmosphere shifted. Gone was the laughter, the jeering, the quiet indifference that had allowed the bullying to continue unchecked. In its place was something else entirely: recognition, tension, and a creeping sense of unease that spread like wildfire. The young man clutching Linda Carter's bag had been grinning moments ago, basking in the attention, fueled by the passive acceptance of the crowd. But now, his smirk faltered. His fingers tightened around the bag strap as he took an unconscious step back, his eyes darting left and right. His bravado wavered, replaced by a flicker of something Keanu had seen many times before, fear. Keanu didn't move at first. He didn't have to. He simply stood there, watching, his presence alone enough to shift the balance of power in the room. His voice had been calm, steady, but there was a weight behind it, a cold finality that made it clear he wasn't playing a game. "Put it down," Keanu repeated, his tone quiet but absolute. The young man scoffed, a nervous chuckle slipping through his lips. "Man, come on. You serious?" He looked around, as if expecting someone, anyone, to back him up. But the crowd that had once been complicit in their silence was no longer with him. The kid with the headphones had pulled them down, his wide eyes locked on Keanu. The woman who had been recording clutched her phone like it might explode in her hands. The businessman who had hidden behind his newspaper now sat frozen, his grip on the pages turning his knuckles white. No one was on the thief's side anymore. "Dude, it's just a joke," the young man said, his voice losing confidence with each word. "Relax." Keanu took a single step forward. The motion was deliberate, controlled. Predatory. "No," Keanu said, his voice dropping into something lower, something dangerous. "It's not." The young man hesitated. His body tensed, coiled like he was weighing his options: run, fight, or double down. For a split second, Keanu saw it in his eyes, that desperate calculation. He saw the moment the kid considered making this worse for himself. And then Keanu took another step. This time, the shift in energy was unmistakable. The thief flinched. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. All right," he muttered, raising one hand in a half-hearted surrender while crouching down. He set the bag on the dirty subway floor with a soft thud. "There. Happy now?" Keanu didn't blink. His stare remained locked on the young man, unwavering. "Apologize." The thief's mouth twitched. "What?" Keanu stepped forward again, closing the distance between them. "You heard me," he said, voice like steel. "Apologize." The subway car was deathly quiet. Every single person was holding their breath, waiting. The young man's jaw clenched. His ego fought against the command, but he was out of options. No allies. No escape. Just the weight of 100 eyes on him, and Keanu Reeves, standing in his path, unmoving, unshakable. Sorry," the young man muttered under his breath, staring at the floor. Keanu didn't move. His expression didn't change. Louder. The thief swallowed again, his voice breaking as he finally relented. "I'm sorry, okay?" He threw up his hands, frustration bubbling to the surface. "There. I said it." Keanu studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. He reached down, picked up Linda Carter's bag, and turned to her. She was still holding the pole, her hands trembling slightly, her wide eyes locked on him. He extended the bag toward her gently, as if handing back something far more valuable than just a worn-out handbag. "Here," he said, his voice softer now. Linda took it with both hands, her fingers tightening around the familiar strap as she pulled it to her chest. Her breath hitched, her eyes glistening. "Thank you," she whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. Keanu gave her a small nod, but he wasn't done. He turned back to the thief, his expression hardening once more. "Get down." The young man blinked, confused. "What?" On the floor, Keanu said, voice low, unwavering. "Hands behind your head." Panic flickered in the thief's eyes. He glanced toward the subway doors, calculating a way out. Keanu shifted just enough to block his angle. His posture relaxed, but his presence was a wall the thief couldn't get past. "Don't," Keanu warned. The thief exhaled sharply, shoulders slumping. Then, reluctantly, he lowered himself to his knees before stretching out onto the grimy subway floor, hands clasped behind his head in surrender. Keanu stood over him, watching. The subway car remained silent, the air thick with tension. No one was laughing now. No one was recording. Keanu lifted his gaze, scanning the stunned faces around him. "Call the police," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. For a moment, no one moved. Then, the woman with the phone fumbled to unlock it, dialing quickly. The businessman pulled out his own phone, muttering something to himself. A teenage girl whispered to her friend before hitting her screen. The subway slowed, brakes screeching as the intercom crackled overhead. Next stop, Civic Center Station. Keanu took one last look at the thief lying on the ground, at Linda clutching her bag, and at the faces that now held something new: shame, awe, understanding. He had come onto this train just wanting to be left alone. But some things were worth standing up for. As the subway screeched to a halt at Civic Center Station, the tension inside the car was suffocating. The doors slid open, and within seconds, the unmistakable sound of heavy boots pounding against the platform filled the air. Four uniformed police officers stormed inside, eyes scanning the scene before landing on the young man face down on the grimy floor, hands behind his head. Keanu Reeves took a step back, arms crossed over his chest, his presence still dominating the space. "He tried to rob her," Keanu said, his voice calm yet commanding, nodding toward Linda Carter, who was still gripping her handbag like it was her lifeline. "Shoved her. Took her bag. I stopped him." The lead officer's gaze flicked to Keanu, and for the first time, recognition dawned. Keanu Reeves. His expression barely shifted, he remained professional, but there was the briefest hesitation before he nodded and turned his attention back to the thief. "On your feet," he barked. The young man groaned, but he didn't resist. He knew better. As the officers hauled him up and slapped a pair of cold metal cuffs around his wrists, he muttered weak protests. "I didn't do nothing, man." The cuffs clicked shut. "Tell it to the judge," the officer replied flatly. Keanu watched, his stance unwavering, as they led the thief out through the subway doors and onto the platform. The moment the officers disappeared, a new energy swept through the car, one that made Keanu's skin crawl. The silence was broken. Passengers who had moments ago been too afraid, too indifferent, too busy watching now came alive, with whispers, with gasps, with frantic tapping on phone screens. "That's Keanu Reeves," a teenage girl whispered excitedly, clutching her phone like a golden ticket. "No freaking way," the kid with the headphones said, his voice still tinged with disbelief. The woman who had been recording earlier was now refreshing her social media feed, her eyes widening. "Oh my God. This is already blowing up," she murmured to her friend. "Check TikTok." The businessman, who had done nothing just minutes ago, now sat up straighter, finally looking at Keanu with a newfound sense of awe. Keanu felt the shift instantly. The anonymity he had clung to was gone. He sat back down, pulling his hoodie forward, trying to disappear again. But it was too late. The whispers grew louder. The phones clicked and flashed, recording, capturing, sharing. "John Wick in real life," someone muttered. "This is insane," another said. Keanu clenched his jaw, exhaling slowly. He didn't want this. He had acted because it was the right thing to do, not for clout, not for attention, not to be turned into some viral sensation. He didn't want the spotlight. He had just wanted peace. But now the internet had its next big story. By the time the train reached Westlake Station, Keanu's phone was already buzzing relentlessly in his pocket. He ignored it, shoving his hands deep into his hoodie as he exited the train, keeping his head down, moving fast through the crowd. Nobody stopped him. Not yet. But he could feel it, the eyes, the whispers, the digital wildfire spreading behind him. When he finally reached his apartment, locking the door behind him, he exhaled sharply and sank into his chair. The quiet didn't last long. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls. Texts. Notifications stacking up like an avalanche. His agent, Keanu, call me ASAP. His publicist, we need a statement. This is huge. A friend, dude, you're trending. Absolute legend. News alerts filled his screen. Keanu Reeves stops subway robbery in real life. Hollywood star takes down thief, John Wick style. Keanu Reeves proves once again he's the nicest guy in Hollywood. Keanu rubbed his face, groaning. He had seen this before. Fame had a way of twisting reality, reshaping truth into something more marketable, more shareable, more entertaining. The headlines missed the point entirely. This wasn't about him. It was about Linda. About the fact that nobody else in that subway car had done anything until it was almost too late. That was the real story. Keanu scrolled through the comments flooding social media. Keanu is the man. Damn, if I was there, I totally would have helped too. What a hero. Keanu's fingers hovered over his screen. They didn't get it. He exhaled, set his phone down, and stared at the ceiling. He had to say something. Not to play into the hype. Not to feed the machine. But to set the record straight. Keanu picked up his phone again, opened the camera app, and hit record. No script. No polish. Just him. Raw and real. The camera focused, his face filling the frame. His eyes were steady, his jaw set. By now, you've all seen the video, he said, his voice low but firm. And I've seen the headlines. They're calling me a hero. I'm not. He leaned forward, letting his words sink in. This isn't about me. It's about her. Linda Carter. An elderly woman, minding her own business, getting harassed, robbed, shoved around. And you know what's worse? His voice tightened. No one did anything. His gaze darkened. They watched. They recorded. They laughed. He let the silence hang before continuing. That's the real story. Not me stepping in. It's what didn't happen until it was almost too late. He held the camera steady. Don't call me a hero. Ask yourself, what would you do? Would you help? Or would you just watch? A long pause. Then, a single nod. That was it. He ended the recording and uploaded it. No captions. No tags. Just truth. Within minutes, it started spreading. The comments changed. Damn. He's right. We suck. I would have just stood there too. And that's messed up. We need to be better. Keanu tossed his phone onto the table and leaned back in his chair. It wouldn't stop the hype. But maybe, just maybe, it would shift something. Even if it was just a little. The buzz didn't stop. Keanu's video had gone viral, but not in the way people expected. It wasn't a polished Hollywood statement or a carefully crafted PR move. It was raw. Honest. A challenge. And it hit differently. The internet wasn't just calling him a hero anymore. They were questioning themselves. He's right. We all just watch. I don't know if I would have stepped in, and that bothers me. Why did we laugh? Why did we record? We're part of the problem. Keanu had done what he always did, he flipped the script. This wasn't about him. It was about us. About the way we choose to exist in the world, about the things we ignore, the injustices we pretend not to see. But the viral storm wasn't just about self-reflection. It was still chaos. News outlets dissected every second of the subway incident. Pundits debated the bystander effect. Social media was flooded with reaction videos, opinion pieces, even memes. And yet, through it all, Keanu couldn't stop thinking about one person. Not the thief. Not the reporters. Not the internet. Linda Carter. The elderly woman he had defended that night. The woman who had clutched her bag like it was her entire world. The woman whose gratitude had been quiet but felt deeper than any applause ever could. He hadn't been able to shake the way she looked at him. Not with awe, not with starstruck wonder, but with something deeper, something real. She had been through far more than just one bad night on a train. He could see it in her eyes. And that's why, a few days later, Keanu Reeves walked into a small community center in South Central Los Angeles, unannounced, unaccompanied, and completely unseen. No cameras. No press. Just him. The room was simple, fluorescent lights humming overhead, a few worn-out plastic chairs, a chipped coffee table with old newspapers stacked on top. A different world from the red carpets and flashing cameras he was used to. And there, sitting at one of those plastic tables, was Linda Carter. She looked smaller here, wrapped in a well-worn shawl, her scarf draped loosely over her shoulders. But when she saw Keanu walk in, her eyes, sharp, tired, but still filled with quiet strength, widened in surprise. "Didn't expect to see you again," she said, her voice soft but steady. Keanu shrugged, slipping his hands into his pockets, offering her a small, lopsided smile. "Had to make sure you were okay." Linda nodded, patting the handbag beside her. "I'm fine. Been through worse." There was something about the way she said it. Keanu didn't push, didn't pry. He just waited. After a pause, Linda exhaled, running her fingers along the worn leather strap of her bag. "This," she murmured, voice distant. "It's all I've got left of him." Keanu tilted his head slightly. "Him. My husband, James." She let out a breath that carried years of memories. "Past 5 years ago. These are his letters. Wrote M when he was overseas, before we got married." Her fingers trembled slightly as they traced the edges of the bag. "I'm a retired nurse. Widowed now. Barely scraping by. But this," she tapped the bag gently. "This is my tether to him." Keanu felt his chest tighten. He understood loss. Understood what it meant to hold on to the last pieces of someone who was gone. The world had turned him into a hero for a 5-minute standoff, but this was real. He leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. "They're making it about me out there," he said. "It's not." Linda blinked, confused. "Not about you." Keanu shook his head. "It's about you." She stared at him for a moment, searching his face, trying to understand. Keanu exhaled, glancing around the community center, at the worn walls and faded bulletin boards. He had been thinking about this since that night on the train, about how he could make sure that this moment didn't just become another viral clip, another story forgotten when the internet moved on to the next big thing. So, he had made a decision. No interviews. No late-night talk shows. No Hollywood spin. Instead, he had called his accountant. Set something up. "I'm funding a scholarship," he said simply. "In your name." Linda's breath caught. "A scholarship?" Keanu nodded. "For nursing students. Kids from neighborhoods like this. Ones who can't afford school." He leaned back slightly, shrugging like it was nothing. "Figured you deserved more than just a viral video." Linda's hands trembled as she pressed them against her bag. Her eyes, already misty, overflowed. "Why?" she whispered, shaking her head. "You don't even know me." Keanu's voice was firm, but warm. "Because you deserve it." Linda wiped her tears with the edge of her sleeve, letting out a soft, broken laugh. "You gave me more than my bag back," she murmured. "You gave me purpose." Keanu smiled, a real one this time. Small. Honest. Real. "Good," he said. "Keep his letters safe." The story that really mattered. Weeks later, the headlines faded. The world moved on. The internet found something new to obsess over. The viral videos, the reaction clips, the news debates, all of it disappeared. But in South Central Los Angeles, at a small community center that most people had never heard of, something else began. The Linda Carter Nursing Scholarship. It didn't make the news. It wasn't a Hollywood story. But it changed lives. And when the first class of nursing students started their training, Linda was there. Standing at the front of the room, her bag beside her, her voice strong. She told them about James. About the letters. About the night she almost lost everything, and the stranger who refused to let that happen. Keanu wasn't there. He didn't need to be. Because this wasn't about him. It was about her. And in the end, that was the only story that really mattered. The headlines moved on. The world found its next obsession. Just as Keanu Reeves had predicted, the internet's attention was fleeting. One day, he was the face of a real-life hero story. The next, the digital landscape was flooded with something new, another celebrity scandal, another viral meme, another distraction. But some things don't fade. Some stories take root. And while the noise around Keanu Reeves, subway hero, died down, something else began. Something real. A different kind of legacy. The Linda Carter Nursing Scholarship had its first class of students. 20 young men and women sat in a modest classroom in South Central Los Angeles, notebooks open, pens poised, nervous energy crackling in the air. They weren't kids from privilege. They weren't students who had grown up with endless options. They were fighters, people who had seen struggle, who had watched family members get sick and wished they could do something about it. And now, they could. At the front of the room stood Linda Carter, no longer just the woman who had been harassed on a subway. Now, she was something more. She clutched her handbag as she spoke, the same one she had nearly lost that night, her fingers brushing against its worn edges. But she wasn't holding it out of fear anymore. She was holding it because it had carried her here, to this moment, to this chance to change lives. She told her story, not just about the robbery, but about the years before that night. About being a nurse, about her late husband, about the sacrifices that came with both love and service. And then, her voice steadied, and she said the words that had stayed with her ever since the night she met Keanu. You don't have to be a hero to make a difference. You just have to decide not to look away. She watched as the students took that in, their pens pausing, their gazes lifting from their notebooks to meet hers. For some, it was just an inspiring phrase. For others, it was the first time anyone had told them that they could be the person who steps up when no one else does. Keanu's quiet goodbye. Keanu wasn't there for the first day of class. He wasn't at the scholarship announcement. He didn't show up for photos, didn't give a speech, didn't do interviews about his donation. Because it wasn't about him. Instead, he had done what he always did, he slipped away, back into the quiet corners of the world where he felt most at home. A few days after he had spoken to Linda at the community center, Keanu had walked the streets of Los Angeles alone, his hands tucked into the pockets of his worn-out jacket, his head low under his hoodie. He didn't need the world's recognition. He just needed to know that what he had done mattered. And he had. The scholarship was real. The students would learn. Lives would change. That was enough. He had done his part. The story that wouldn't die. But the world hadn't entirely forgotten. Months later, on an ordinary afternoon, Keanu sat in a quiet coffee shop, sipping black coffee, his presence unnoticed by the bustling crowd. Then, his phone buzzed. A message from a friend. "You've got to see this." Attached was a video link. Keanu hesitated. He had spent the last few months avoiding the internet's fascination with the subway incident. He had no interest in reliving it. But something told him to press play. The video opened with a shaky shot of a young woman, her face beaming with nervous excitement. She stood in a small medical classroom, wearing a crisp white coat over her scrubs. And then she spoke. "Hi. My name is Jasmine. I'm the first recipient of the Linda Carter Nursing Scholarship. And I want to tell you why this matters." Keanu sat up straighter, his coffee momentarily forgotten. Jasmine's voice shook, but not with uncertainty, with passion. She talked about growing up in a single-parent household, about watching her mother work 3 jobs just to afford rent. She talked about how she had dreamed of becoming a nurse, but tuition had been a wall she couldn't climb. Until now. Until a stranger on a subway decided that one act of kindness shouldn't be the end of the story. Until Keanu Reeves decided to do something more. Jasmine held up her stethoscope, smiling. "Because of this scholarship, I get to be what I've always wanted. I get to help people. I get to be someone who doesn't look away." The video ended with a simple text overlay. "You don't need to be a hero. You just need to care." Keanu sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, his chest tightening with something bigger than pride, deeper than gratitude. He wasn't the type to cry, but there was something about this, about seeing the ripple effect of one moment, one choice, that made his throat constrict. He hadn't done it for recognition. He hadn't done it for thanks. But knowing that this was the outcome, it meant everything. A different kind of ending. The world loves stories of heroes. It loves tales of actors who play larger-than-life characters stepping into real-life situations, taking down bad guys, saving the day. But this was never a story about Keanu Reeves, the action star. This was a story about what happens when someone decides to care. Keanu didn't want the label. He didn't want the spotlight. But he had made a choice, a simple one. To stand when no one else would. And because of that choice, an elderly woman's dignity was restored. Because of that choice, a thief learned that cruelty isn't power. Because of that choice, a classroom of students got a future they never thought possible. Keanu Reeves never wanted to be anyone's hero. But in the end, maybe that's exactly what made him one. Life moves fast. The world changes in the blink of an eye. One headline replaces another, and people forget. They forget the stories that once captivated them, the moments that seemed important at the time but quickly fade into yesterday's news. But not everything is forgotten. Some choices leave echoes that stretch far beyond the moment they were made. Some acts of courage, no matter how small, plant seeds that grow in ways no one could have predicted. Keanu Reeves never wanted to be the face of a viral story. He never wanted to be labeled a hero. He simply saw something wrong and decided not to look away. That's it. That's all it takes. One moment. One decision. One person choosing to act and everyone else stands still. Because of that choice, Linda Carter walked with her head a little higher, knowing she was more than just a victim on a train. Because of that choice, a thief learned that cruelty isn't as powerful as kindness, and that even in the shadows, justice has a way of finding you. Because of that choice, a class full of nursing students, who never thought they'd have a chance, now had a future. Keanu never stepped back into the spotlight to take credit. He never showed up for applause. He just did what needed to be done, and then he let the impact live on its own. That's the thing about doing what's right, it doesn't need a stage. It doesn't need an audience. It just needs someone who refuses to stay silent. A lesson for the rest of us. It's easy to scroll past injustice. It's easy to tell ourselves that it's not our problem, that someone else will step in. It's easy to believe that we are just one person, that we don't have enough power to change anything. But the truth is, one person is enough. Keanu didn't change the world that night on the subway. But he changed someone's world. He changed Linda's. He changed Jasmine's. He changed the people who watched and felt ashamed that they hadn't acted first. And maybe, just maybe, the next time they see something wrong, they won't wait for someone else to do something about it. The world isn't changed by heroes in capes. It's changed by people who refuse to keep their hands in their pockets while someone else suffers. So the next time you see something that isn't right, the next time you witness cruelty, injustice, or silence where there should be action, ask yourself. Will you stand? Or will you scroll? Life gives us moments, defining moments, where we are faced with a choice. Do we step up, or do we look away? Most of the time, we convince ourselves that it's not our responsibility. We assume someone else will handle it. We tell ourselves that we're just one person, that our voice, our actions, won't make a difference. But that's a lie we tell to make ourselves comfortable. Keanu Reeves didn't stop that thief because he wanted attention. He didn't defend Linda Carter because he wanted to trend online. He did it because it was right. He saw injustice and chose not to ignore it. That's the lesson. It's not about being a hero. It's not about being famous or powerful or fearless. It's about refusing to let fear, apathy, or comfort stop us from doing what needs to be done. Every day, we are faced with situations, some big, some small, where we have a chance to be better. Maybe it's standing up for someone being mistreated. Maybe it's speaking out when we see something wrong. Maybe it's simply choosing kindness when indifference would be easier. The world doesn't change because of one massive heroic act. It changes because of thousands of small ones. So ask yourself, when your moment comes, what will you do? Because in the end, doing nothing isn't neutrality, it's a choice. And it's the wrong one.